For much more on Wednesday's news, welcome in Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports. Bruce, let's start very simply. What is the appeal of Tony Petitti to fill one of the most powerful seats in all of college sports?
Rick, I think there's a few things that he brings that are real attractive to the Big Ten, especially the Big Ten as it is now, with both USC and UCLA coming in and the transition to the TV deal that's coming up. So first of all, he has a strong background and roots in college athletics, even dating back to his time as a D3 athlete himself. But his time both at CBS and ABC, working on the formation of what was the old BCS. So he had a lot of time spent with the heavyweights of college athletics at that point, especially, Jim Delaney from the Big Ten, Roy Kramer, back, the kind of a godfather of the SEC. And then when he got to CBS from CSTV and college sports, I think that was, furthering the relationships. But I think also, from my understanding from talking to people close to this situation, it was very attracted to the Big Ten leadership. His time at MLB, both at MLB Network, but then certainly, at Major League Baseball, with some of the innovation he was really responsible for, the Field of Dreams game, the World Baseball Classic, which has been such a success, really being forward thinking. But then the other aspect of it where he worked as building consensus with 30 different owners and presidents and what had to happen there with MLB. And I think when you look at going into the Big Ten as it's getting a lot bigger now with the two LA schools coming in, there's just a lot of different perspectives that I think you have to manage and work with. And so I think his experience is pretty unique in that he has it on both fronts. That's why he was so attractive to them.
Bruce, let's continue on that subject. What will be the most important aspect of Tony Petitti's job as it relates to the addition of USC and UCLA when they come into the fold before the start of the 2024-25 athletic and academic school year?
I think it's so much of a changing landscape that we're in right now. As you mentioned, I mean, those are two huge brands from different part of the country coming in. They're going to have some different needs as it gets managed, but also, remember, he's going in now. You have three major TV partners with Fox, that obviously was already a big part of the Big Ten, but also now NBC and CBS come into it. And so manage those relationships. I think all that transition, in addition to some of the other things that are really hard for the leadership in all conferences and colleges to manage right now, with NIL especially, how it goes forward, and also kind of the messaging. As I said, he did some really cool, innovative things with Major League Baseball that for a long time felt like it was really stuck in a different time, and they really did a lot of cool things to go forward, which I think that is attractive to an emerging landscape, because right now you're looking at a big sea change as we go forward. I mean, he's going to start in the middle of next month, and this is we're going into playoff expansion. There's just so much that is changing right now about the sport. To have somebody who has strong roots in it, but also I think has shown that he can be very reactive and proactive.
Talk about the change, and that is certainly the buzzword in college sports right now. Between NIL, the transfer portal, the upcoming change to the football schedule, the change to the recruiting calendar, the increasing costs of student athlete welfare, all of those different things are in the world that we live in right now. And that is what Tony Petitti will face when he takes over in this job. Among all those, what do you think he has to deal with most immediately?
I think it's really managing the people that you are working for, and that is the leadership of the Big Ten and quite honestly, the athletes themselves. And so when you get USC and UCLA coming in with a much different perspective on things, you not only have the travel schedule, and a lot of people, myself included, are going to look at it from a football perspective, but there's so many other athletes and teams and programs that are tied to that. And I think to make it all as seamless as possible, where it's going to be a dramatic change for a lot of the student athletes involved, as we're talking about NIL, but we're also talking about a lot of different opportunities that I think are now the possibilities for these programs And for the leadership there, I think it's stuff that they're still trying to figure out. And so his perspective, I think, could be really, really pivotal in terms of lining up what happens for them. Because of, the portal is a big thing in terms of roster management. I think diehard fans look at it and go, okay, how does this affect us? We're short at this position. We need more defensive linemen or whatever. But I think when it comes to NIL, I think the canvas is only starting to be filled in. And so what can he bring to this, and how the schools can be, not how they can manage it, be more supportive in it, because I think that's a hard thing for a lot of schools to get their heads around right now.
All right, Bruce, let's finish here. What does it say about Petitti that the COPC, the Council of Presidents and Chancellors, decided to once again go with another quote-unquote non-traditional candidate, a candidate that doesn't necessarily come from a background of college athletics administration?
Well, I think the fact that he worked on the network side so much, and I think he's been so strong in the content part of it, even right up to recently with his time with the 33rd team, really on the NFL side, I think bodes well, because the guy he just followed, Kevin Warren, and I know he's a polarizing subject, but did a lot of good things, but also had a lot of big challenges in the role. Kevin Warren had come really from the team side with the Vikings, and where, you're basically responsible for your ownership and going forward. When you get into the Big Ten now, you really have so many other people you need to get on board for things. And I think that building a consensus piece, I think that is really a tricky dynamic. And it's hard for people who come from it, maybe from one side of it, whether you're from the team side and you've moved up, whether it's an athletic director or somebody like that. Yes, they have it within their athletic department, but they don't have such a varying experience to manage so many different egos and people who come at it from literally all over the map. And I think right now with the Big Ten as it sets up, that's exactly what this job shapes up. So I think that's why, to me, he's less outside the box than the commissioner hires in the Pac-12 and even Brett Yormark in the Big 12, because this guy has a lot more experience in college athletics and has a lot deeper relationships to start, and the perspective because of what he did before he got to MLB. I think for people who only look at it at MLB, they look at it one way, and I think you're probably short-sighting his experience that he had deep into college athletics before that.
Great insight and perspective from Bruce Feldman of Fox Sports. Bruce, we truly appreciate your time on this developing story.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rick.
So Kevin Warren took over as Big Ten commissioner. In June of 2022, USC and UCLA agreed to become the 15th and 16th members of the Big Ten Conference. Then Warren and the Big Ten completed that massive television rights deal before, on January the 12th, Kevin Warren announced he was accepting the Chicago Bears president position. And on Wednesday, his successor was named as the Big Ten officially announces the hiring of Tony Petitti as its 7th conference commissioner. And for more on that hiring, welcome in Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic. Nicole, let's start with the very simple reaction that you had to hearing that Tony Petitti was the next commissioner of the Big Ten.
It was a name that I wasn't familiar with. I feel like I've gone through this over and over again with some of the commissioner hires that have happened in major college sports. And you look and you immediately start learning about the background that he has and his work with various media companies and Major League Baseball. And then you start to talk to people and they just really rave about him as a leader and the way that he's able to get people on board with his vision, but also the creativity that he brought, especially during his time at Major League Baseball. So it's one of those names that you immediately have to Google, but then you start talking to people in the business. And of course, they know who he is and they know, and they've worked with him. And I think that it becomes a piece of a puzzle that you place in and realize exactly why the presidents wanted to go with someone with this background.
Nicole, for those who follow your writing, they follow you at the forefront of a lot of the changing subjects in college athletics. NIL, transfer portal, student athlete welfare, things like that. Let's start with NIL because it is such a hot topic right now. What does Tony Petitti immediately have to address when he takes over as far as NIL is concerned?
Well, I think he's going to figure out his stances on these issues, right? And that's part of what happens when you hire someone from outside college sports. It takes a little bit of time for them to ramp up. But this is someone who really likes college football and has worked in the space before and certainly has a basic understanding of how these things work. And I think with his background in professional sports, he also understands the business model and is potentially changing business model as we look at legal challenges that are coming to the collegiate model and the evolving world of NIL. And so I think he'll probably have a good understanding from a business side of how these deals work, what endorsement deals look like, what are potential regulations that make sense around these things, or if he has problems with this. But it is a number one topic for so many people because it is ever changing and it is something that has looked different every 6 months since the NIL era began. But I think it's about talking to your coaches, your administrators, athletes about how it all works, figuring out what the stance is, what you're pushing for, or where you can protect athletes from maybe parties around them that are bad faith or bad actors in the space. But I think it's literally just getting your arms around the issue, understanding it on a campus to campus level, and then figuring out where you go from there. But I feel like with someone with an experience and a background in professional sports, there's more of a comfortability, again, in the space of like endorsements and sponsorships, as well as anything that could potentially challenge the collegiate model as it moves more and more towards a professionalization model.
Nicole, what are you most interested to hear from Tony Petitti regarding his opinion on the details that still need to be finalized with the expansion of the college football playoff?
Well, that's number one. I'm very interested in that because we would love to get more information about how the expanded playoff is going to work. There are media negotiations that need to be done for even 2024 and 2025 in the existing contract with ESPN for the first 2 years of a 12-team playoff. And then you're basically starting from scratch for a new contract for 2026 onward. This is someone who has a lot of experience and a lot of different hats worn in this particular space and with different media companies. So very curious to see how he is involved in those negotiations. And also, we've wondered all along if the Big Ten and the SEC might push for changes to the revenue distribution model because they're probably going to send the most teams. Their teams are going to advance. Would there be some sort of a model that looks similar to the way the NCAA tournament works, where you're rewarded for your participation and your deep runs? Will we see that with the college football playoff? I'll be very curious his stance on that as well.
Obviously, the Big Ten is in a fantastic spot financially. How much easier does that make Petitti's job, at least at the start, or does it actually put a little bit of pressure on him inheriting what he inherits at the time that he inherits it?
I think a lot of people would love to walk into a situation where you know that your membership is going to be bringing in more than $1 billion per year. There's a reason we talk about the Big Ten and the SEC differently than we talk about everyone else. It's because of those media rights revenue that they're bringing in. So it's a great position to start at. I will say that short-form deals and agreements are different than actually ironing out all of the details and finishing up those long-form contracts. So that will be something that he will need to work on. And that's where his expertise will really shine when he begins right out of the gate. But I also think that you're starting in a position where that is not a pressing need. That is not something that is your main priority or something you have to do in the first year of your tenure. So you can really focus on what do you need to do with USC, UCLA? How are you going to schedule a 16-team league in all of your sports when you are first and truly the first national conference in college sports? So you can focus your energy on all of those things, or playoff expansion, the new media rights deals that need to get done there, and be nimble and understand the rest of the landscape without that immediate need and the urgency that we see a lot of times when commissioners get hired. The first thing that they have to do is negotiate a next media rights deal. I think you have a luxury of not walking into that and really finishing it up, but also prioritizing other things like stabilizing your league and its footprint and figuring out how it's going to work when your footprint now goes from LA to Piscataway.
Nicole, have just about a minute left, and I think I know you well enough to know you're not just a journalist, you are truly a fan of sports. Kevin Warren did some great things, but he was, to be fair, a polarizing figure among fans of the Big Ten. From a fan perspective, what are you most interested in seeing with Tony Petitti and how it is similar or different from his predecessor?
Well, I think the fans pick up on communication, right? And the ability to have your athletic directors and your football coaches in your corner. And I think when you look at like the SEC, they feel like Greg Sankey is always fighting for them. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at from a fan perspective. You want to feel like your commissioner is going to be fighting for Ohio State, fighting for Michigan, fighting for your teams that make the playoff, and putting your best teams in position to succeed. That's from a scheduling standpoint. That's from negotiations. That's from working with and even sometimes against, pushing back on your other commissioners. So I think understanding that landscape and seeing how that works, but understanding that if someone has great relationships, you really will see it. You'll see it in the way that the football coaches and the athletic directors talk about your leader. And so I think that was something that Kevin Warren struggled with, certainly with the COVID year, and then had to rebuild that trust and rebuild those relationships. That will, I think, be the number one thing for Tony here as he hits the ground running, is making sure that everyone believes in you and your vision and you're all on the same team. And I think that's something that fans will see.
Nicole Auerbach of The Athletic. Nicole, we truly appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.